Last week, the National FFA officers, which include their National Vice President, Secretary, and 4 Vice Presidents, stopped in Upsala to meet with the local FFA chapter as they toured Minnesota last week and into this week. I had a chance to speak with Taylor McNeil, who is the National President of the student body of the FFA organization. McNeil explained how she got involved in FFA.
It's something that I got involved in 9th grade, and going through the program I just fell in love with the leadership side, but then also the agriculture side. I showed livestock since I was 10, and it was a natural fit to then be involved in FFA, and seeing the difference it made in my life, then I was looking for opportunities to serve back, and then it started with serving as a state officer and then as a national officer. So I look at it as how can I do the best in my role to help all those student members that we have.
McNeil also talked about what farming down in Arkansas is like and what it's like on her farm.
Down in Arkansas, I've lived there for about 10 years now, and the state is kind of split in half. So on the western side, we have a lot of cattle farmers and poultry houses. We're home of Tyson, and then on the eastern side, we're the #1 rice producing state, and so we have a lot of rice farmers, and we're the home, or I guess headquartered is Riceland. So we've got lots of different agriculture there in the state, which is pretty cool. We find our fit in the livestock that my dad raised cattle growing up, and then we bought some land there in Valonia, that's my hometown, and I actually got started in goat production. So I raised market goats and then registered boar goats, and that was my project at about 25 when I graduated high school, and that's what I spent most of my time doing.
McNeil also talked about the message that she's trying to get across to members as they meet them.
This year, the 6 of us national officers have an opportunity to meet so many students. We have about 630,000 members, and the statistics are we'll directly meet about 120,000 of those members. And that's really awesome, and so we see, okay, what can we pass along the knowledge that we've learned to the members that we meet? And one philosophy that I gathered when I read a book called Love Does by Bob Goff was live palms up. And so that's living palms up means that you're ready for whatever comes your way, and then you use that to serve those around you. And I think that's a message of what FFA does in members' lives, is it provides opportunities for them, and then they take those and use it to serve those in their community and around them.
I also spoke with Nick Baker, the FFA secretary for the national team. He's from Tennessee, and Baker talked about how he got involved in FFA down near Nashville.
Well, it really started when I was a freshman and went to my very first national convention and saw just how inspirational it was when there were 60,000 like-minded young leaders all together in one city to celebrate one thing, and that's agriculture. And from that moment, I knew FFA was going to be for me, and so throughout the course of my high school career, I stayed involved and active as possible in FFA, and ultimately became a state officer and wanted to continue that service to the organization that's given me so much. And so that was sort of my thought process leading up to running for national office.
Advisors play a critical role in helping their students. Baker emphasizes this and how the advisors that have helped him throughout the years have impacted his life.
You really can't put a price tag on the relationship an FFA member has with their advisor, because I know Jessica Lumpians and Danielle Johnson, Jackie Vester, and Steve York are some people that no matter where I am and no matter what I'm doing, I can always count on those people to be there for me, to get me back on track and to keep me headstrong and in the direction that I want to be heading in. And so, they gave me a passion for service, they gave me a passion for agriculture, and they've really done some amazing things in my life and in hundreds of other students.
Baker also talked about what it is with the national team that makes it so important when it's talking to its members and getting the message across.
Really, we are the student representation of the National FFA. In all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, we have 629,367 FFA members. And so we, the National Officer Team, are responsible for the correspondence between those FFA members and the National Board of Directors. And so we communicate the successes and the trials of our organization so that for the next 88 years, we can have a successful organization that develops premier leadership, personal growth, and career success.
Baker also talked about what he plans to do after he's served his term with the National FFA.
That's a great question. Right now I'm at the University of Tennessee studying ag communications, and I'd really be interested in going into agricultural policy with the Tennessee Tennessee and the American Farm Bureau, simply because I think there's a really great battle to be fought for the American farmer, whether it's in the state capitol or in the national capitol. They need people to go and fight for them. Before that, immediately after I graduate from UT, I have a plan on enlisting in the United States military for about 3 to 5 years, just because actually, as a result of my involvement with FFA, I've gotten to travel around the world and around the country, and it developed just this really great sense of pride I have in where I come from. And so if given the opportunity to serve my country, I'd love that, and whether that's in D.C. or across seas.
Baker also talked about what the national team does for local and state chapters.
What's great is that when you're an FFA member, there's so many people, whether it's your advisors or that collegiate FFA chapter, that are pouring into you constantly. And then when you become that collegiate FFA member or that alumni FFA member, it's your turn then to pour into those students. And so as a collegiate FFA member, we put on the different career development events for our students. We help coordinate different experiences and different processes for the surrounding counties and the surrounding FFA chapters. And so simply put, when you're in FFA, you are developing your potential for that premier leadership, personal growth, and career success. As a collegiate member, you make those opportunities available.
Umbra Meyer is the vice president for the Central Region and is from Iowa. Meyer talked about how she got involved in FFA and where that's led her.
I started at a very young age. My freshman year, I've been noticing that the Upsala FFA members get to join when they're in 7th grade. We did not have a middle school program at my high school, but my brother was in it, and when I was an 8th grader, I watched him as a sophomore, and I was like, I want to do that when I get into high school. So once I started my freshman year, I enrolled in an ag class and got involved right away, and my teacher posed to me a question if I wanted to do the Creed Speaking career development event, and I was a little hesitant at first because I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but then I decided to go forth with it, and there were a lot of moments where I was frustrated at doing not as well as I wanted to in practice, but I really fell in love with everything FFA had in store, going to district and state convention and meeting people and becoming passionate by reciting the FFA creed and just saying, I believe in the future of agriculture. And that's kind of where I got the start in the organization, and it's just kind of continued on from there.
Being the newly elected officers for the national team has not allowed the officers to relax much. Meyer talked about how it's been a whirlwind travel for the newly elected team.
Well, we were elected on October 31st, and following that, we were immediately rushed back to the hotel. We had a short debrief with our coach and our parents, and then the next few days we just spent at a retreat in Indiana, where we're headquartered in Indianapolis. We spent the next few days at a retreat and then went to the National FFA Center and met their staff and kind of had an onboarding. Then I returned home to school, was expected to finish 5 weeks worth of classes in 2 weeks, and tried to do that as gracefully and as thoroughly as possible. And then after that, got to enjoy Thanksgiving break with my family. Once Thanksgiving was finished, all of us as a team flew out to Indianapolis and began training. And we trained for 3 weeks before coming home for Christmas over workshop development and keynote speeches that we'll deliver this spring and summer at our state conventions. And this week here, we've been trying those on and practicing those and really getting to share those with students. It's been really neat and definitely fast-paced, but we hold on and we enjoy the people we're surrounded by. And gosh, Minnesota nice is a real thing. It is.
Meyer talks about some of the different reactions that students give when they meet the national officers as they travel the country.
It's interesting because there are definitely different reactions. There's some members who were like me when I was in high school, and I thought it was the coolest thing to be a national officer. So bug-eyed, really excited, and it's just interesting to have that perspective flipped of being in the role and realizing I'm just a human being, and being real with them has been really neat. And then there are some members. Yesterday we were at Melrose High School with their FFA members, and there were some freshmen that had no idea what national office was, and they were just cutting up and having a good time with us. So it's been really neat to see those reactions of some people are completely just like flabbergasted that we're there, and then some don't even realize what national office is. And sometimes that's the coolest because then there's no expectation, and it's really just getting to hang out and get to know them for who they are and vice versa.
Meyer talks about what her future career looks like after she finishes her term serving with the national FFA team.
It has. I definitely took for granted what I had growing up. I was born and raised on a crop farm in northeast Iowa. We run currently about 700 acres worth of corn and soybeans, and I begrudgingly would get up in the summertime and pick up rocks from the field and walk fields and pull weeds and ride with Dad in the tractor. And I never really appreciated it until I was probably a junior, senior in high school when I started seeing that direct correlation that my love for FFA had with my love for agriculture. With my career, it's definitely has and will continue to guide that path. I really love the ag industry. I've gotten to do some different internships through it, and FFA has opened up those doors and the floodgates for more opportunities. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. It's kind of a couple different goals that I have in mind. I really would like to look into the policy side, but I think I ultimately want to get my master's in agriculture education and go back to the classroom and impact students' lives like my teacher did for me.
Sarah Draper is the Western Vice President for the National FFA team and hails from Utah. Draper talks about what it's like farming in Utah and how she got involved in FFA.
So we have a lot of national parks, so we're not known very hugely for anything like Wisconsin and dairy, and here I've heard lots of dairies. Lots of kids were telling us they grew up on dairies. So in Utah, it's a wide variety of things. So there's lots of corn, lots of alfalfa. I personally worked in a dairy growing up, and so there was a few dairies here and there. There's a few hog operations, but nothing huge that stands out about our state. It's a little bit of everything, but we are very agriculturally diverse because we have a lot of rangeland, so we have cow and calf operations. So it just depends on where you're at in the state, because some have trees and it's flat, some places have sagebrush and it's hilly, some places are just pure rock and mountains and canyons. So it really depends on where you're at. I was that one kid in the class to raise their hand and ask my advisor, so can I get an A and not have to join this weird club? And I did not want anything to do with it. I didn't really know what agriculture was. Sure, I lived in the middle of nowhere, but didn't really understand much about anything like that. But advisors being advisors, they were able to persuade me into just trying one contest, where it's called the FFA Creed. It's a public speaking contest where you present a 5-paragraph statement of beliefs that were related to agriculture, FFA values, and you present it. They told me I'd only be saying it in front of a couple judges. Lo and behold, after you say I believe enough times, you really start to, and it really grew that passion in me, and I learned more about agriculture, joined, became a chapter officer. I actually won state for creed speaking, and that just sort of fueled my fire. I started competing in everything, just really got involved. But in Utah, so I'm the first national officer in 40 years and first female ever. So just having that already stigma that we don't have national officers anymore, it's not going to happen, really also fueled my fire, because enough people told me I couldn't do it, so I really wanted to prove them wrong. But also at the same time know that even as I'm preparing for running for national office, the ways I'm preparing ultimately help me in anything, whether I made national office or not. But getting come home to Utah and be able to see all the people are so excited, and just seeing that I broke that glass barrier for other students to now really see that it's possible just made a whole world of difference, and I was glad I was able to do it.
Draper also talked about why her role is so important on the team for getting the message out between FFA members and industry affiliates.
As the National Western Region Vice President, I'm able to go across the nation and talk with different members, sponsors, supporters, you name it, we get to talk to them, because we're sharing the message of FFA and also about agriculture. So that means a lot of nights in a hotel, a lot of plane rides, and a lot of days away from home. But it's totally worth it to be able to spread all the opportunities that FFA has to offer, as well as make sure people know where their food comes from and acknowledge those who produced it.
Cindy Schneider hails from Ohio and serves on the National FFA team as its Eastern Vice President. Schneider talks about why the national team is so important for both FFA members and the national organization.
So as a whole, all 6 of us serve as the student leaders for the National FFA organization. And so we are the voice of the organization for students as we travel around and ensure that we continue to stay relevant and continue to serve the agriculture industry.
Schneider also talks about how she got involved in FFA and some of the positions she's held prior to becoming a member of the national team.
Yeah, so coming from a really small town, a lot of people in my high school were a part of our FFA chapter, and so my 8th grade year, my cousin was the chapter president, and so of course I had some other family members as well, so easily went into FFA because I had that background. I definitely say that's the reason I joined FFA to start with, because I had family there. So I served as a chapter officer for 3 years. I was chapter reporter, president, and student advisor. And then I served as our state FFA secretary in Ohio and then our state FFA president.
Snyder talks about how the National FFA helped her discover her talents and what she plans to do after she leaves her position as the vice president for the Eastern region on the National FFA team.
One thing that I feel really passionate about is the fact that each of us has very, very unique talents. And for me, it was the National FFA that allowed me to discover those talents and really begin to implement them. Really don't think I'd be passionate about agriculture if it wasn't for that. And so this year I'm really excited to help members across the country find those talents and utilize the FFA to push those forward and figure out what it is that they can do in their lives to really pursue those passions. So I'm an agricultural communication major at Ohio State right now. Very interested by public relations, communications type work, and so I'm excited once I go back to start getting involved with like internships and looking at that. Of course, this year I'm going to have the cool chance to see a lot of companies in play, and so I'm definitely looking into that once I graduate of being involved with communications.
Mackenzie Barth, a member of the Upsala FFA chapter, serves as the Region 2 secretary. Barth talks about how she got involved in FFA and what the size of the Region 2 is here in Minnesota.
I actually did not grow up on a farm, which is getting to be more common in FFA. And I joined FFA because my friend Audrey was the advisor's daughter, and she really loved it, so she really encouraged me to join. Which is from Upsala, which is about in the center of Minnesota, all the way to the Canadian border. So we have officers from Upsala, from Staples and Grand Rapids and Little Falls.
Barth talked about some of her favorite events while being involved in FFA and what it's like having the national team right at her local chapter.
It's probably a little bit of everything. I really like the events because you meet so many people when you go to them, and I really like chapter events because you get to bond as a chapter when you run something like fruit sales or donkey ball. It's really awesome because they only visit Minnesota probably once every 50 years, so I'm very, very excited to be hosting them, and not very many chapters get to host them. It's very exciting and very, very happy about that.
Finally, we spoke with Jane Canott, the president of the Upsala FFA alumni group, which helps support the Upsala FFA chapter in various ways, like helping donate food to the recent banquet that they had when the national officers were here. Canott talks about how she got involved in FFA and how the FFA chapter, alumni chapter at Upsala got started and what they do.
I was in FFA in high school. That was my number one activity. I grew up on a beef and hog farm in northwest Minnesota, and FFA is dear to my heart. I feel I'm the person I am today because of it. I had an awesome advisor in my freshman year that helped cultivate my self-confidence and work on me to go, instead of just 2 year, to go to a 4-year college. So it's dear to my heart, and I'm really happy to be able to give back to the organization. It's really a lot of fun. Well, we're a fairly new affiliate. We started our chapter a year ago in September, so that would be September of 2014. So we've been active just over a year. We have roughly about 15 members at this point. And we basically, the chapter wanted to get an alumni chapter started, the local FFA chapter wanted to get an alumni chapter started to be a resource for the local ag teacher and FFA advisor here. So really our number one goal is to be here to help Gretchen in any way she needs. What we do when we get members is we have a resource form that we have them fill out, so where their talents and interests lie. If they were on judging teams when they were in FFA. And just to note, you don't have to be an FFA to be an alumni member, which is really cool. You might just have an interest. Maybe you're good at gardening and you want to be involved with, the floriculture team or whatever it is. So, but we basically see where everyone has interest, talents, equipment that could be used. And then Gretchen has a go-to, inventory of if she has a soils contest coming up and someone has access to a backhoe, maybe someone has property where they can go out and do a soils pit and the kids can go out there and practice. So we're just kind of touching the surface, tip of the iceberg as far as how we can help her. But so far, we're a big thing tomorrow. We're helping for the first time organize and carry out a state food science contest that's going to be held here tomorrow. So we have 8 teams coming from all over the state of Minnesota that are going to be competing in a state food science contest. So we helped doing the shopping for that, all the equipment that's needed in the fax room. I'm going to be helping judge that contest, which I was volunteered for. We're going to be helping as proctors, judges, timers, that type of thing. So we helped some with the petting zoo. We've helped some with the fruit sales. We meet roughly quarterly with the chapter and Gretchen and find out what they have coming up for events and what the needs are. It might be someone that's available to help one of the teams practice for a contest they have coming up, or so the sky's the limit. We're just getting started, but we've already done a lot of things, and we've got an awesome officer team and local people that have been very, very supportive, both financially and of their time and talent. So
Kanat also talked about some of the upcoming events that the alumni chapter will be helping host.
One of the other things we're doing in a couple weeks, we're involved helping with Donkey Ball, which they have on January 18th. So I think we're going to do a raffle for a fundraiser for the alumni, but we're also going to help the kids in the concession stand. That's their fundraiser that night. And wherever else we might be needed that evening. I know she's looking for people to help chaperone at the state convention coming up in, I believe that's in April. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be available, but that's probably the next thing on the radar, the next big events we have coming up. And again, we're new, so it's hard to say what's all going to happen in the next year.
Kanat mentioned how you can get involved if you want to join the Upsala FFA alumni chapter.
If they want to get involved, they can contact any of the officers. They can contact Gretchen. We all have membership forms. It's a $25 a year membership fee. $10 of that we have to give to the State of Minnesota FFA Foundation, and then $10 goes to national. $5 goes into our kitty so that we can start accumulating funds. Because one of the things we help do as well is, if there's donations needed, like tonight, all the food that we're going to have has all been donated. We brought cookies last week during National FFA Week just as kind of a thank you to the egg teacher and the kids. So just having a little bit of a kitty to do some of that too, and then the members have been very generous with their personal funds as well. So
Recently, the National FFA officer team visited Upsala High School and met with the Upsala FFA chapter. We've been speaking with various members of the national team, along with some local members and some alumni members that help support the Upsala FFA chapter.